I never thought a simple cup of coffee after work would change the way I looked at her forever. She was my boss, the CEO, untouchable, sharp as glass, and always 2 steps ahead of everyone else. But that night when I walked into her office, and she smiled with a softness I had never seen before, she said words that froze me in place. "You're not leaving here tonight." Just kidding. Except it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like a line I wasn't sure either of us was ready to cross. "My name is James Carter. I'm 40 years old, and I've worked in this company long enough to know the walls echo with gossip more than numbers. I'm not the kind of man who usually draws attention. I do my job. I try to stay out of the spotlight, and I head home to an empty apartment. Life has been steady, predictable, and if I'm honest, painfully quiet. I buried myself in work after my divorce. Work became safer than late-night conversations or the sound of another set of footsteps in the hallway. She, on the other hand, was nothing like me. Her name was Catherine Reynolds, 50 years old, elegant in a way that made every room pause when she entered. People saw a boss, a strategist, maybe even a rival. I saw the way her eyes softened when she looked out the window too long, or the way her laughter, rare, quick, and almost hidden, slipped through when no one was expecting it. She intimidated me, but she fascinated me, too. That evening, the office was nearly empty. Most people had already left. I was still wrapping up a report when her voice cut through the silence. "James Carter, coffee?" I turned, thinking I'd misheard. She never invited anyone for coffee. Not like that. But there she was, leaning against her office doorframe, a faint smile on her lips. My first instinct was to say no to avoid whatever complication this might lead to. But instead, I found myself nodding. Inside her office, the atmosphere was different. Gone was the steel-cold air of board meetings. A small lamp on her desk gave the room a warmer glow, almost homelike. She poured coffee into 2 mugs herself, something I'd never seen her do for anyone. "Sit," she said almost casually, though her tone carried that familiar command that made people obey without thinking. I sat awkwardly at first, waiting for her to launch into some business talk. But she didn't. Instead, she asked me about my day, about me. Not my numbers, not the project deadlines, me. I didn't know how to answer. Nobody at work cared about James Carter the person, only James Carter the employee. Yet she listened, eyes fixed on me in a way that made my words stumble out before I could stop them. That's when she leaned back, held her mug close, and let out that sentence that still burns in my memory. "You're not leaving here tonight." Just kidding. She laughed softly, but it wasn't the kind of laugh you throw into the air to fill silence. It was lower, private, like the sound was meant only for me. I smiled, though my chest tightened. Was it really a joke, or had she just exposed something neither of us dared admit? I looked at her, searching for the answer in her expression. For a second, I thought I saw vulnerability behind her playful smirk. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. She straightened, her co-mask slipping back into place. Before I could respond, the door opened. Eric, one of the younger analysts, poked his head in. His eyes darted between us suspiciously quick. "Sorry, Catherine Reynolds. Didn't know you were busy," he said, though his tone carried more curiosity than apology. His gaze lingered on me a second too long before he left. Catherine Reynolds's eyes narrowed just slightly. The warmth in the room cooled, and I felt the weight of what had just happened press down on us both. Whatever she had meant by her words, the moment was now shared with someone who had no right to it. That night, walking out of her office, my mind wouldn't stop spinning. I couldn't decide what had just happened. Was it a harmless joke? A slip of honesty? Or the beginning of something I wasn't sure either of us could control? All I knew was this. After years of silence in my life, I finally felt something stir. And it terrified me as much as it thrilled me. Rumors spread faster than truth. I should have known that. The morning after that coffee with Catherine Reynolds, the office air already felt different. Whispers, glances, the kind that follow you when you walk down the hall. And at the center of it was Eric. His smirk was sharper than usual. His voice a little louder, just enough for me to know the story had already started. Heard James Carter's getting private meetings now. He joked to someone near the break room. Guess he found the shortcut to the top. Laughter followed, cheap and cruel, and I felt my stomach knot. I kept my head down, but inside I was torn. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, to pretend it meant nothing. Another part knew exactly how dangerous this could become. Catherine Reynolds wasn't just another colleague. She was the CEO. Any misstep, any wrong impression, and my career would be over before I even realized it. But she didn't seem rattled. If anything, she seemed closer. That day, she passed by my desk, pausing just long enough to ask, "Lunch later." It wasn't loud. It wasn't for anyone else to hear, but it was enough for me to notice Eric's eyes on us again. Sharp as knives, I wanted to say no, to create distance. But when she looked at me like that, calm, confident, as though nothing in the world could shake her, I couldn't. We ended up in a small restaurant not far from the office. No one from work was there, just the two of us sitting in a booth by the window. For the first time, I saw her without the armor. She asked me about my past, my marriage, the years I'd buried under spreadsheets and long hours. I told her more than I meant to. Maybe it was the way she listened, or maybe it was the way her hand brushed mine when she reached for the sugar, as if it were an accident. But it didn't feel like one. At one point, she leaned back, studying me. "You know," she said softly, "people think I don't notice anyone outside the boardroom. They think I'm untouchable. But I've noticed you for a long time." I froze. The noise of the restaurant faded. My mind searched for the right answer, but nothing came. I wasn't prepared for her honesty, for the weight of her words. "Catherine Reynolds," my voice faltered and I stopped. She smiled, not unkindly. "Don't worry, you don't have to say anything." But in her eyes, I saw something real. Something I wasn't sure either of us had expected. That night, I replayed it over and over. Was she serious? Was it just her way of keeping me close, testing me? Or was there truly something deeper between us? The thought thrilled me and scared me at the same time. Then there was Rebecca. She called me that evening, casual at first. "How's work?" But the conversation shifted quickly. "James Carter, you need to be careful," she warned. "People are talking. If you're not careful, she'll burn you without even meaning to." Her voice carried a mix of concern and something else. Something almost personal. I'd known Rebecca for years. She'd always been a friend, maybe more if I'd let it be. But my mind was with Catherine Reynolds. Her words wouldn't leave me alone. "I've noticed you for a long time." When I walked into the office the next morning, Eric was waiting by the elevator. He leaned in with that grin I hated. "Careful, man. Playing with fire." His voice was low, mocking like he knew more than he should. I walked past him without a word. But inside, I was shaking because the truth was he wasn't entirely wrong. I was playing with fire. And yet, for the first time in years, I felt alive standing close to the flames. Power struggles in business are nothing new. But when they creep into your personal life, they hit differently. By the time Thomas showed up, the air around Catherine Reynolds and me was already fragile. Rumors floated in the halls. Eric's whispers grew sharper, and Rebecca's voice lingered in my ear. "Be careful." I tried. But how do you stay careful when every glance, every word from her feels like gravity pulling you closer? Thomas was older, seasoned, a partner in the company who prided himself on seeing weaknesses in others. He was the kind of man who shook your hand while measuring how easy it would be to push you off the ledge. One evening, as I was leaving, he caught me in the lobby. "James Carter," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "A word." I followed him outside. His car gleamed under the streetlights, black and polished like his reputation. "You've been spending a lot of time with Catherine Reynolds," he began. No question, no courtesy, just a fact dropped like a stone. "She's my boss," I answered carefully. He chuckled. "Sure, but let me give you some advice. Catherine Reynolds has two loves, business and control. Cross either line and you'll find yourself on the wrong side of both. And if she doesn't cut you down, I will." His voice was steady, but the threat underneath was sharp. That night I couldn't sleep. His words echoed, feeding the doubts I already carried. Was I imagining her interest? Was I a fool for letting my heart stir for someone so far out of reach? The next day, Eric made his move. In front of the entire team, he accidentally let slip a comment about my private lunches with the CEO. The laughter that followed felt like knives. My ears burned, but I kept my composure, locking eyes with Catherine Reynolds across the room. She didn't flinch, didn't show anger or embarrassment. She simply looked at me, steady and calm, as though daring me to hold firm. Later, Rebecca found me in the parking lot. "James Carter, this isn't you," she said. Her eyes were full of worry. "You don't play games. You don't chase power. She'll use you whether she means to or not. And she stopped herself, shaking her head. "I just don't want to see you hurt." Her words stung because they came from a place of care. Rebecca had always been there, quietly loyal, perhaps waiting for a moment like this. But she wasn't Catherine Reynolds, and I hated myself a little for how quickly my heart dismissed her warnings. That evening, Catherine Reynolds asked me to stay after hours. Her office was quiet, the city lights glowing through the glass walls. She closed the door, and for the first time, I saw her without the mask. "I know they're talking," she said. "I know Thomas is circling and Eric is stirring things up. But I need you to understand something, James Carter. This isn't a game to me." Her voice was low, almost breaking. "If people find out, if this gets messy, I lose everything I've built." But she paused, meeting my eyes. "I don't want to lose you." Her words silenced the storm inside me. For weeks, I'd questioned whether I was imagining this connection. But in that moment, I saw the truth. She was risking something, too. I wanted to reach for her to tell her I'd stay no matter the cost. But before I could, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her face hardened. "Thomas." She declined the call, but the moment between us had shifted. The outside world was clawing its way in. And I realized our story wasn't just ours anymore. It had enemies, eyes, and consequences. Walking home, I felt the weight of it pressing down. Thomas had drawn a line. Eric was fanning the flames. Rebecca was trying to pull me back. And Catherine Reynolds was standing in the middle asking me to stand with her. For the first time, I understood. This wasn't just about a joke over coffee anymore. This was a fight, and I had to decide if I was ready to take it on. There are moments in life when the air itself feels charged. When silence carries more weight than words. That night in Catherine Reynolds' office was one of them. She had asked me to stay, not for work, not for strategy, but simply to share a bottle of wine she kept tucked away in a cabinet. It felt out of place, like discovering a hidden door in a house I thought I knew by heart. We sat across from each other at her round table, the city glowing through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her. She poured 2 glasses, her hands steady, her eyes soft. "To surviving the week," she said with a faint smile. I lifted my glass, our fingers brushing for just a second. A spark, quick and undeniable. First, the conversation was light. Stories of the early days of the company, her battles with stubborn investors, her triumphs that nobody outside those walls ever knew. Then slowly, the mask began to slip. She told me about nights alone in her penthouse, staring at contracts until dawn, about losing friends along the way, about the cost of chasing perfection. Her voice was steady, but there was something in her eyes, a loneliness she rarely let anyone see. I listened quietly, my chest tightening with each word. I'd always seen her as untouchable, a woman carved from steel. But here she was, human, vulnerable, letting me glimpse the cracks she usually hid. And for the first time, I wanted nothing more than to close the distance between us. At one point, she fell silent, her gaze drifting toward the city. "Do you ever wonder," she said softly, "what it would be like to live without all this? To walk away from the titles, the meetings, the endless pressure, and just be?" I hesitated, then answered honestly. Every day, her eyes met mine then, and the world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of us. I could feel the pull, the invisible thread tightening. My hand moved slightly toward hers, and she didn't pull away. For a heartbeat, I thought we were crossing that line, the one we'd both been dancing around since that first coffee. Then her phone lit up. The name on the screen froze us both. "Thomas," she sighed, staring at it as if the device itself were a chain. She didn't answer. The ringing stopped, But the spell was broken. The air, once warm and electric, grew heavy again. She placed the phone face down on the table, her hand trembling just slightly. "I can't ignore him forever," she whispered. "He's dangerous. He wants control, and if he suspects us, he'll use it." I wanted to tell her none of it mattered, that we could fight him together. But the truth sat like a stone in my throat because I knew she was right. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was about power, about survival in a world that wouldn't forgive her for being human. She stood then, walking toward the window, her silhouette outlined by the city lights. "You should go," she said quietly. I rose, my heart heavy. Every step toward the door felt wrong, like I was walking away from something I couldn't name, but desperately wanted. At the threshold, I paused. She hadn't turned back, but her reflection in the glass was enough. Strong, unshakable Catherine Reynolds staring out at the empire she had built, and the loneliness that came with it. I wanted to cross the room, to take her hand, to tell her she didn't have to be alone anymore. But I didn't. Instead, I left, the echo of my footsteps mocking me all the way down the empty hallway. That night, lying awake in my apartment, I realized something. We were standing at the edge of a line neither of us dared to cross. But sooner or later, one of us would. And when that happened, there would be no turning back. The end didn't come with fireworks. Came with silence. The kind that settles in your bones before you realize your life has just shifted forever. Thomas made his move first. One morning, the boardroom buzzed with tension before a single word was spoken. He had gathered the partners, files spread like weapons on the table. I sat near the corner, my pulse hammering, while Catherine Reynolds entered with her usual calm. She didn't look at me, not once, but her presence filled the room. Thomas's voice was sharp, practiced. He laid out accusations, not of incompetence, but of impropriety, whispers of favoritism, questions about judgment. My name was woven through every sentence like poison. A CEO, he declared, should not risk the company's reputation over personal entanglements. The words landed like a blade. I wanted to speak, to defend her, to deny it all. But Catherine Reynolds's glance silenced me. A subtle shake of her head as if to say, "Not you, not now." She stood poised and delivered her defense, not with panic, but with grace. "This company is more than rumors. It is built on results, and no one, Thomas included, will take that away." Her voice was steady, but beneath it, I heard something else. Farewell. The meeting ended with no verdict, only unease. Thomas wasn't finished. He never would be. Later that evening, Catherine Reynolds called me to her office. The wine glasses were gone, the warmth of that night replaced with a stark, almost cold air. "James Carter," she said, her tone softer than I expected. "This can't continue." My chest tightened. "Because of him. Because of all of them," she replied. "Thomas, the board, the whispers. I fought too hard for too long to let it all burn now. And if we keep this, whatever this is, it will destroy you too." I shook my head. "I don't care about them. Care about you." Her eyes softened, pain flickering in their depths. "And that's exactly why I have to end it. Because you care. Because you deserve more than secrets and battles in boardrooms." For a moment, the world stopped. I searched her face for any sign that she didn't mean it, that she'd take it back. But Catherine Reynolds was a woman who never lied to herself, and she wouldn't start now. She reached for the silver locket around her neck, unclasped it, and placed it in my hand. "So you'll remember," she whispered. "Not the CEO, not the rumors, just me." I stood there frozen, the cool weight of the locket pressing into my palm. My throat burned with words I couldn't force out. I wanted to beg, to fight, to refuse. But deep down, I knew this was her way of protecting me, of sacrificing what we might have had for the life she had to keep. When I finally walked out of her office for the last time, I didn't look back. Couldn't. The door clicked shut behind me, and it felt like the sound of something breaking. Days turned into weeks. Catherine Reynolds kept her empire. Thomas, for all his threats, never managed to topple her. She remained untouchable as she always had. And I went back to my quiet life, my reports, my empty apartment. But every night when the city lights flickered through my window, I held that locket in my hand. Inside was a single picture, younger, freer, the side of her she rarely showed. And I thought of her words, the ones that still haunted me. I don't want to lose you. In the end, she didn't. Not really, because a part of me will always belong to her. To that night of coffee, laughter, and the line we almost crossed. Love doesn't always end with togetherness. Sometimes it ends with sacrifice. And sometimes that sacrifice is what makes it.